members, I just wanted to let you know we are back on stream and now currently live streaming. The portion of the meeting that we couldn't put on live streaming because of technical difficulties is recorded and will be posted and married up with this portion for perpetuity on YouTube. So we are now reconvening and we are live streaming from this point on. So I ask you to go to agenda item number 6, and this is the project status report. Includes the watershed status report 72, operation status report 73, corporate services status report number 74, the finance, the monthly update report 75. And we will do that block motion that we usually do, but with regard to the quarterly report, update report number 76, I would like a motion that the NPCA 2016 quarterly report be received and distributed to participating municipalities, community stakeholders, the community liaison advisory committee, and the public. The rest of the reports are just received and are part of the record, but I'd like a specific motion on that. Nikki? James? The motion to receive and distribution of the quarterly report. Are there any questions to that quarterly report? Seeing none, then I'll call the question on that item. All those in favor? That carries unanimous. Thank you. So to continue, we also have the forestry bylaw, tree bylaw status report 78, a report on the 2016 Niagara Children's Water Festival 79, and prioritization of the BMPs to improve water quality, report number 8. Mr. CIO, are there any of those reports that we need to highlight comments from staff?
I'm going to provide one. I'll turn it over to Peter on the water quality, but just to bring to your attention, project status reports, operations, I want to highlight to you the St. John Center. If you recall, in 2014, when we formally received full ownership of St. John Center, we were operating at a deficit of $250,000. I'm happy to report due to the efforts of David Barrett and Mark Zirkle that we now have turned over that to an $87,000 gross profit. So that's a swing.
Surplus is the word we use.
Oh,
profit.
Okay. Revenue flow, I should thank you for correction. Revenue flow, that's a turnaround of $337,000. It's pretty much good.
Thank you, Chairman.
And Peter on the water quality?
Yeah, if I may,
Please,
Chair, we can just address the board and just really briefly. So the board kind of, the report lays it out, but I just want to reiterate that on an ongoing basis, an annual basis, right, we've seen the annual water quality report come out via the NPCA Water Quality Management Program, which is overseen by Steve Number, our supervisor of water resources, but also the key person in that whole piece is Josh Diamond and his team. There's the collection and monitoring and the actual report that's put together. You've seen in previous years actually a formal presentation by Josh. The team does an excellent job across the expanse of our watershed in terms of monitoring water quality. But the one element that comes out of it loud and clear in the annual quality report and in some of the presentations is that generally speaking, our surface water quality in Niagara and in our watershed is quite poor. It's shown minimal improvement over the years, some in some key areas or specific areas, but generally it's really challenging some significant poor water quality. So with that, there was a specific recommendation from the board to say, well, we'd like to get a better understanding of what are we currently doing in terms of best management practices, and is there anything that we could be doing shorter term, as well as even the long term view of how we can maybe refocus or retool our efforts to try to address some of the poor water quality. So the intent of the report again is to kind of provide that background, provide a little bit of context about non-point sources of pollutants, the challenges that exist with that, because it can come from various sources, and it's very difficult to kind of really pinpoint a specific source of some of the contaminants that are causing the poor water quality across our watershed. But with that, and without going into a lot of details, Josh is here to answer these specific questions the board may have on the report. But I wanted to bring to your attention that about a review of, so what ultimately comes down to what are we doing about poor water quality. So it kind of highlights the report in terms of our existing restoration efforts. There's a lot of things that we've already been doing, and the process actually that we do follow right now is very much a best management practices approach. We understand, based on the information that's provided to the restoration group by the water quality monitoring team and the program, they try to tool and plan the restoration efforts to try to address those as best we can. Of course, there's limited funding, there's limited resources in terms of what can be done. But one thing we did highlight in that is that we could possibly do a little bit more of a refocus geographically. Because as an initial review or approach that we have done and we've revisited under page 3.6, the prioritization of watershed based on water quality areas. They use a fairly simple yet it's an effective approach to prioritize BMP by watershed planning area. And they use 4 key water quality parameters that are listed there: total phosphorus, total stick solids, E. coli, and nitrate. And in that order, they rank them in terms of its subsequent effect on water quality. And with that, that's where table 1 was generated on page number 4, I believe. So it gives an overall, basically, prioritization in terms of here are the sub-watersheds or watershed planning areas that we should really focus on moving forward to try to really make an impact on water quality. But as the report goes on, it's very, very important to emphasize that that's just kind of a first step in the process. There's many other things that affect water quality. And there was a recommendation in there that we have to take a little bit more in-depth review of that. There's specific software that's available that we can use to really leverage that additional criteria to really fine-tune our efforts. Because one of the challenges, and it's in the staff report, is at first blush you say, okay, Big Forest Creek is an area that we really need to focus on. However, 12 Mile Creek, for example, is the only cold water piece that actually will support brook trout. It's critically important. So it's not something that you want to say, okay, let's ignore 12 Mile Creek, for example, in terms of our efforts. So we're doing the best we can with the resources and funding that we can to try to address the water quality piece, but also not ignore the fact that habitat and other things in terms of the criteria that we use to rank our restoration efforts should be totally ignored. So again, the purpose of the report is to give you an initial view of what we have been doing, what we could do maybe shorter term to kind of fine-tune our restoration efforts, for example, to address water quality. However, it's definitely painted out here in the summary section in the next steps that we would like to come back to the board in the fall with a more detailed work plan. This is going to require some additional effort on our part to say, what do we really need to do? Because I'm probably as frustrated as maybe some of you are that we see on an annual basis some of the poor water quality that we have. I want to do something about it. We have been doing something about it, but man, we got to try to swing that annual close to the center and really get to the momentum in terms of really making a difference with water quality in our watershed. So stay tuned. We're going to be coming back in the fall with a more detailed kind of plan to say here's how we can really be addressing this in the next 5 to 10 years. That's the type of horizon we're going to have to really start at. So with that, I'd be happy to
members, we have questions? Stuart and Doug?
Going to the table on page 4, on the bottom of that table, can I accept the premise that water quality guideline objective, if we were to meet 30, 25, 100, 2300 ratings or better, the quality of our water would be significantly good? Would we get off the poor and get to a good if we could achieve those levels? Is it that simple?
Thank you, Stuart. Here, Josh is going to answer for us. or-
Yeah, I would say not because really, I'm the overall facilitator, presenter of the report, but we go to the subject matter.
Sounds good to me.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, those would be the Canadian and provincial guidelines for water quality for each of those parameters. If the water quality was actually under those, we would have very good water quality, yes.
So
That's what we're shooting for.
when you say objective, that's the objective.
Yeah, so in the province, they call it provincial water quality objective.
Okay, is it realistic that we can achieve that?
Well, some parameters, yes, some parameters, no. In the short term. Long term, maybe. So, finding the balance between, getting it down as low as you can is a reasonable. To get down to some of those numbers, you're going to have to clear all the people off the face of Niagara Peninsula, reforest everything, and send us all to another planet. So that's not realistic. So we have to figure out what are achievable goals and levels that we can get. So certainly lowering them down. What we have, if you look at Big Forks Creek for total phosphorus, for example, 330. That's very, very high. We can do better than that in overall if we put some work into that watershed and knock it down. If we can get it into the hundreds, like we did a whole study from 2008 to 2010 looking at nutrients in the Welland River, which included Big Forks Creek. And we found that there was a watershed in the Welland River called Coil Creek, slightly forested, and it actually had around 80 to 90 TP. So if we can get the total phosphorus levels in and around that area, that would be good. And some of just the natural environment. We're in clay soils. There's going to be naturally higher phosphorus in our watersheds for that type of
And on the planning area,
Yeah.
you have the upper Welland, you have the central Welland, what about the rest of the Welland?
And we have the lower well as well.
The lower Welland?
We broke it up by the watershed planning areas because the watershed planning areas are kind of geographic areas that we've used for a number of previous assessments of our watershed, not just water quality, but for source water, for just our planning department, we do watershed plans. So there's a whole reason we do watershed planning areas, and each of those Welland River components, the lower, the upper, and central, they're almost like different personalities. The lower Welland River is affected by the Niagara River. We redirect the Niagara River down the Welland River. So it's almost like you have Niagara River water in the lower Welland River.
Yeah.
But the central Welland River, kind of gets the field, the backflow, and gets kind of bottlenecked in the central. So you kind of have it's a different character there. And then the upper is your kind of your spring fed, so it makes sense to break them up in that sense and prioritize them based on their personalities, I would say.
Which one of the pollutants is the most difficult? You said there's no chance on one or two. Which one is the most difficult to bring under control?
I would say generally amongst this is only 4 parameters that we're looking at.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah. So I would say the total phosphorus is going to be a difficult parameter to bring down to that 30. You're probably never going to be able to bring it down to 30, but you can certainly bring it down from 330.
Well, now you've been on 50.
Right, and that's a highly, it's a very forested watershed. It's full of water, spring fed. So that's a special case. It's a very special watershed.
And we put a lot of work into it.
Yes, we have to work with it too. Yeah.
So with the intent then, Josh, is that we probably set specific targets or goals for each watershed plan area?
We could do that. Yes, that would be certainly an option. I know in kind of our in our minds, we have some numbers. We look at for total phosphorus, for example, about 120 micrograms per liter is what we look for as kind of an ideal goal for a watershed. And in the kind of agricultural areas of Niagara and our watershed. If you look at the Grand River, they kind of use around like that same value of 120 total phosphorus as a realistic, achievable goal.
Well, if we can make it better,
Yeah, and that would be a
it's
big,
good for a lot of people.
yeah.
Thank you. Another meeting that satisfies your concerns?
Yeah, it's gone from this down to this.
Yeah. Well, I think the whole subject is prioritized, and that's what Josh was kind of making the point, what is achievable, and what we should focus on. Josh, I have a couple other questions, Doug, and then Sandy.
I don't have a lot of questions for you, Josh, because actually a number of meeting asked a lot of my questions that I was going to ask you. But I just want to make an overarching statement and just kind of comment on the fact that the Niagara region wants to grow to a population of 600,000 people, and the GTHA is not about to slow down anytime soon. So I think it's incumbent upon us to get a handle on this now, because by 2041 we will be a larger region, a larger GTHA. So I think, like I said, I think we need to start now, get a handle on this, and try to tip the scale now as opposed to later, because it may be a little bit more difficult to do later on. That's all I wanted to say. Stu has asked a lot of questions.
Thank you. Mayor Joyner. Sandy.
Thank you. To the your technical advisor, I don't know what title you use now. Water quality specialist. You use for a water quality specialist. Understanding that the best management practice priority level has been established. When you establish that priority level, is any consideration taken into other impacts, say for example, economic impact? Because I am looking at Fort Erie. Fort Erie drives a certain percentage of its economics from beachgoers, our proximity to the water, and understanding that nutrient levels causing coniferous algae, and that seriously degrades that shoreline and impacts the opportunity for sun seekers and sunbathers and people to enjoy that water. That has an overall economic impact to communities that utilize that bigger shoreline. Does that go into the prioritizing of where we're at in developing strategies to combat some of those pollutants?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, we've done numerous watershed plans, and the watershed planning process looks exactly at what we're talking about. You know, what is the impact on beaches if we have high nutrients entering the near shore and adding nutrients and allowing golfers to grow on the beaches? How is that impacting the residents? So we need to focus on, I would say, watershed planning. That's what kind of takes in all those things. I'm specifically just the subject expert on water quality and chemistry and so on. But the watershed plans bring all that information, the economic, the social, and the environmental all together to deal with the issues. So very you're talking about.
Yeah, so to that point then, do we have levels, acceptable levels, that would mitigate algae formation along the shoreline? Do we have those numbers? I mean, I'm seeing median concentrations between 2011 and 2015. And understanding that we still have algae blooms along the Lake Erie shoreline that are impacting not only residents, but tourism, a whole bunch of other factors. So what are the minimum acceptable concentrations as far as benchmarking? What should we be shooting for? Do we have those numbers?
Through you, Mr. Chair, well, first of all, a caveat of this is we don't really spend any time in the near shore from a conservation authority perspective.
But it's coming from upstream.
Yes, correct. So, you obviously you want to get them as low as possible. If you go out to the Lake Erie, Lake Ontario, the concentrations of total phosphorus are less than the provincial water quality objective. The issue of algae along the shoreline is very, very complicated. You're talking zebra mussels. You're talking. There's another parameter out there called soluble reactive phosphorus. So we're talking about total phosphorus, all the phosphorus, but there's actually reactive phosphorus, which there is no guideline shore. And that is a biologically available phosphorus. How is that impacting? How much of that is getting out into the lake? That will affect. We don't have specific guidelines from, what we use is the provincial water quality objective, which is 30. That's what the province uses as a standard to prevent conditions that would be eutrophic in lakes and rivers. But going out to the near shore, if you have highly water that's full of nutrients, it's certainly going to slosh along the near shore and be cause an effect. The Great Lake question, that's a huge question about how to deal with the Great Lake issue along the near shore. There's a whole team like Toronto just trying to deal with that very issue. So ideally though, yes, bringing down our nutrient levels as low as possible is the best case scenario to improve the near shore. Sort of a long-winded answer.
No, I appreciate that. I understand. So they've been using, these are provincial numbers right now, as far as provincially acceptable numbers of phosphorus?
Correct.
Is that, okay.
Yeah.
And we know that those provincially acceptable numbers still are having very little impact on rectifying that situation down there. So is it time to maybe re-examine those numbers? And will that, any of that information, will that go into the strategy that we put together on our end?
Yeah, it's a tough one. Well, I think the numbers are actually not that bad in the grand scheme. I just think the Lake Ontario Lake area issue about algae along the near shore is more complicated than just simply total phosphorus. It's a whole series of issues associated with that. And total phosphorus is one piece of that puzzle. So I think the concentration levels that we're talking about for the provincial that's listed here are 30. Is a fine concentration to set as a guideline. So from that, that's how I'd answer that component. Now in terms of how are we accounting for that, that's would get into kind of a watershed plan. I mean, there was a Lake Erie North Shore watershed plan that's completed. There was a Fort Erie watershed plan that's completed by the Conservation Authority. They certainly could use updating. I think there was some plan to have them updated. I know Suzanne, you're sort of defer to you, or it's Peter here. You were more involved in that process, but I think it was every 5 years.
I'll leave it as a staff recommendation, because I do believe that that needs updating, because it's still a problem. I'm still getting calls, not only as a regional representative, but as a member of the NPCA, understanding that people think that it's within our mandate water quality issues that are affecting algae blooms along that Lake Erie shoreline. Understanding that, yes, it's a operational solution that's going to take provincial, but we have to have a starting point somewhere. Because if we keep doing the same thing over and over and over again, we're not getting closer to the solution. So I'll leave it with you guys to maybe get back to me with strategies as far as what I can tell the residents that live along the shoreline, what I can tell the beach goers that can't utilize these wonderful beaches because of the algae.
So if I may, Chair, page number 5 and 6 of that, it's actually highlighted right there where up until 2012, just to reaffirm what Josh has indicated, that we did have some watershed plans completed. Not all of them, I believe most were, but it was discontinued at that point. So again, I think the watershed plans are absolutely critical because they provide the framework, the direction. As part of that, we did get some funding, and we leveraged that funding to hire consultants to complete a gap analysis, essentially, of our watershed plans. Saying, okay, what's in place, what's not, how are we going to prioritize our efforts in terms of what watershed plans should be updated first, et cetera, and have a plan in place. So that is, I would estimate, about 95% complete. So when we come back in the fall with the work plan, that gap analysis is going to be a critical point. So duly noted, or Vice Chair, that we will take that specific concern and make sure that is noted and embedded in that gap analysis. That will include recommendations of how we're going to proceed with the water plan, making sure that's included in that.
And just one more final point. Even if you guys need any modeling with respect to what the economic impact is to to unhealthy shorelines and inaccessible beach areas, I'm sure we can provide that for you as a town, or as a region, as far as what the economic impact of that is as well.
If I may, Mr. Chair, can I provide the Vice Chair with, if your permission, with some background about the lake issue, some of the parameters, provide a little bit more context for what kind of the issues we're dealing with in the Lake Erie Basin?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you, Sandy. We've taken the note of your concerns and direction. We have that concern of our own Long Beach Park program. And Carmen, I think you have a couple of suggestions in response.
Well, so just to frame this picture, the initial report we brought to you was, look, we have some poor water quality, and we're seeing these results annually. That was stage one. This stage is what we're coming to you and saying, here's our prioritization. We were kind of like all over the watershed. Now we're going to refocus and just hit our priorities now, because we have a limited funding envelope. So let's maximize our resources and efforts on those prioritized areas. So the first was a global picture. Now we're asking you to allow us to steer it here. And then in the fall, we're going to actually tell you what the implementation programs are. And so that's the 3 stages to our approach.
Okay. Thank you, Carmen. Members, are there any other questions to Peter regarding the water quality report number 80? Members, are there any questions to any of the other reports? Thank you, Josh. Subject expert, I think is the other title that goes along with yours. Thank you, Peter, for your highlighting that particular item. Certainly water quality is, as Vice Chair Niagara suggested, is one of the public expectations that is something we do want to deal with. So members, I need a mover and a seconder to receive the reports 72 to 80. We've already done 60, because we've already done 76. By Stu and Mickey. All those in favor? That carries. Thank you. Item 13 is the policy review living landscape project, report number 81. Remember, we have a recommendation here, and I need a mover and a seconder, that report number 8160 be received for information, and that the board approve or release for public consumption of this staff report, which includes the draft discussion paper and a Dylan presentation from July 20th. Peter, a couple of comments, short, and then I think the main focus of this is that is now would be released for public comment, public consumption in this draft.
Appreciate
Go ahead,
that.
Peter.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So as a staff report, just one key message I wanted to send is that there were some queries in terms of, because we haven't been as visible in this specific initiative for the living landscape. Kind of somewhat overshadowed, if I may, with the Welland River floodplain mapping and all the consultation engagement that went with that. So actually, through one of the watershed floodplain committee meetings, it was kind of proposed that we could use kind of an update on, where things at with the policy review, knowing that we were coming to the board in July. So in the staff report, I specifically provided a brief summary of activities for this project since its inception, kind of late in 2014 when we were starting to gather some initial information, and then ultimately in the spring of 2015 when we kind of got the thumbs up to go and send out a request for proposal. We selected Dylan Consulting that has an extensive experience in policy reviews with other CAs, municipalities, other agencies. So their experience is very extensive. So we're very pleased to have them on board. Patty Kennedy, the senior project manager and partner at Dylan Consulting, is here to present a brief presentation to kind of make sure everybody's up to speed on this project. So the staff report is, I think, self-explanatory in terms of summary of activities. I specifically highlighted in the report, bolded the kind of the stakeholders, the public consultation, people that we're actually consulting with over this time period, so it's very clear. And then ultimately, it's the other final point I wanted to make is that there's a lot of planning work that's taken us to this point and various interactions that we've had, but really we're only at the point now where the sleeves get rolled up and we really take a hard look at the policy document, try to get a rough initial policy document in place, at which time we will in the fall we'll go back to the public again and say, okay, we've heard what the kind of primary concerns are. Here's the first cut out of it. What do you think? And then we'll continue to do the process. So Patty Kennedy, I want to call him up and he'll again provide kind of an overview of where we've been and more focused on kind of the main elements we picked up from this draft discussion paper, which again is highlighted in that report.
Thank you.
Enough for me.
Members, I do understand the timeline we have to deal with this morning, and Patty does as well, but this review of our policy is significant and important, and we need to take every opportunity to explain to the board and the public how we're working through this process. This is one of the areas where the province does give each conservation authority a fair bit of latitude on their own policy. And so it is important that we understand and the public understands the process we're going through. So Patty, take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I appreciate you guys got a busy day today. I'll try to move quickly through the content. I do apologize, it's a bit heavy. There's a lot of material. It's kind of dense. So maybe I'll try to leave more room for questions at the back end rather than going through verbatim all the points on the slides. But I basically want to cover three elements. Today I want to give a bit of an update on where we're at with the project, provide you with a few highlights from our report, and talk a little bit about next steps. By way of background, it's been a while since we talked about this. The policy document that we're updating is the policies, procedures, and guidelines for the administration of Ontario Regulation 155.06. It's that document there on the left. It's the tool that staff use on a day-to-day basis to make decisions around applications and to understand what the current policy framework is in the province and how it applies to the site-specific context. So it is their key tool. Our job is working with staff to update it, bring it up to date. Why does it need to be brought up to date? Well, there's a couple of reasons. One, it is actually identified in your strat plan as a priority project that you update this document. Second point is, there's a whole bunch of things that have changed since it was last created. It was originally drafted in 2007, a few amendments here and there since then, and it's over 5 years since it's been a housekeeping amendment, and there's a lot of plans and policies that have changed since then. Locally, a bunch of official plans have been updated. There's emerging considerations around climate change and some of the things we heard discussed this morning could influence the policy package we put on the project. So, very dynamic landscape. The final point to make is we are aware that the provincial planning framework is always changing. It never seems to be a good time to update something because as soon as you start, there's another process that is going on. So to that point, we're aware that there's 4 provincial plans under review. 3 of them that apply in this context, the Green Plan, the Greenbelt Plan, and the Scarlet Plan. We're also aware that the province is the Climate Change Action Plan. There's a number of different things that are going on that inform this process, and to the extent possible, we'll try and dovetail those other things. And if we can't, the policy document will identify how to amend it at a later date, so we don't prolong the adoption of the plan extensively. Now the process is a 3-phase process. So the first, I was last with you at the end of the first phase, just highlighting what we did for the background research and the project launch. We are now at the tail end of the second phase where we've done a fair amount of analysis and background research on your current policy document, trying to identify what the gaps are. And we're at a point where we'd like to get it to the public to get some more feedback on that, on the discussion paper, and also begin to work on the draft document in phase 3. So I'll be back at a later date next time I see you with a draft of the policy documents for us to review and discuss it next time. Peter did highlight some of the engagement activities, and not to belabor the point, but we have a couple of different groups and levels of engagement that's been going on through this process. Of course, we have 4 meetings 4 times in front of you through this process. We have a core working group that we meet with regularly that is consisted of representatives from the area municipalities. They've vetted the content in the discussion paper and got a lot of comments from them. We present to the Community Liaison Advisory Committee 3 times as well to get sort of the sounding board, just to get a general sense of what some of the different stakeholder perceptions may be around the issues that are covered in this policy document updated. We have a series of public engagement activities to deal with to give landowners and members of the public a chance to talk and contribute to the process, and staff have been spearheading our engagement with First Nations as part of the duty to consult. There's a diagram in the report. The next 2 slides are really just about, this is kind of a complex subject matter. There's a lot of interrelated parts and pieces, and a good policy document presents it nice and clear. So you don't have to worry too much about where everything comes from. But it is worth noting that this document has to speak to a whole bunch of planning regulations that are in the Planning Act, the Rural Act, MBL Act. It has to speak to your primary mandates under the Conservation Authorities Act. It has to speak to other specific pieces of legislation like the Environmental Assessment Act. So either when you're commenting on an environmental assessment process, you need to be aware of that process and what the boundaries are of it. The Clean Water Act, particularly the Niagara Resource Protection Plan, approved. There's also a whole bunch of supplementary regulations that are not primary, but the policies need to be informed by control awareness of the Building Code, the Drainage Act, the Energy Act. So all these different pieces have to inform the policies. It isn't just solely the Conservation Authorities Act that the document speaks to. To make it a little more complicated, how you apply the policies depends on the role that you're fulfilling, and you're probably all really aware of this, but for anybody who watches this presentation later or downloads it, there is at least 5 important roles that the staff and the NPCA execute on any given day. They're either acting as a regulator under Section 28 of the Conservation Authorities Act, when they're doing sort of development approval or permit approval in a regulated area. They may be acting on behalf of the province under the delegated interest, provincial interest, which is part of Section 3.1 of the PPS, including floodplains and flood hazards. Maybe acting as a public commenting body. They may also be acting as a resource management agency, which is some of the stuff we hear today, or producing programs, things that are around the watershed to improve conditions. Also as a service provider, there's a number of MOUs in place, all local municipalities. And finally, as a landowner, I guess it's the 6th element. So those 2 slides capture the complexity of policies and how they need to be positioned. And what I wanted to turn my attention to in this next part really is to provide some highlights on what we found. So the discussion paper is kind of a foundation document. It's just intended to have a bit of a transparent platform so that before we go and draft the policies, people can see what we flagged as issues, what we thought the opportunities for improvement are, and also for people to tell us what we might have missed and what they think they need to address as well. So maybe just in case I move too quickly, there are 2 big deliverables for us. One is discussion paper, and the second one is independent of that, which is the draft, which is the policy document itself. Okay? This discussion paper is intended to mirror the content that we see in that policy document. It talks a little bit about the organization of the document, and it covers these discrete topics as well, outlining provincial legislative context for it, what the current policy document says about it, and what some of the opportunities for improvement may be sort of under each heading. As a general observation, I'll just say this ahead, there's a lot of little things that can be done in this document to make it better. Collectively, make it way more functional, way more robust, etc. But as individual things, as I go through them, you may say, that doesn't sound like much, that seems small, it seems like a lot of small things, and I'll try to highlight anything I think is bigger. But generally, if you read the report, there's like a lot of small and medium-sized holes and gaps that need to be addressed from a policy conformity perspective. One of the big things that we did find is just simply about the organization format of the document could be substantially improved. The current document is a black and white document, and it's organized basically around the different roles and functions that the CA operates under. And we think that there's an opportunity to improve that. One of the kind of missing pieces, maybe this is one of the bigger ones, is there's no principles articulated. Any good plan, it's just a set of principles at the beginning. So if you don't have time to go through all the detailed policies, at least you could point to 8 or 10 core principles that explain the policy approach. So that's kind of missing. It's not that it's not out there, it's in all the provincial legislation. It's it's just not been filtered or distilled down into a coherent set of principles that form a policy document. So we think that's a big opportunity for improvement. Certainly having graphics and some more consistent terminology. As a person who writes a lot of these types of plans, just being really consistent with how you use should, shall, must, may is very important so everybody understands it. And that's an important set of terms for this group here, so we'll be sure to address that. Finally, the other section that is kind of missing is an implementation section. It talks about all the tools. We talked a little bit about watershed management plans and their role. It would be good to have a section in the report that talks about these are the plans we have in place, this is how often we're going to update them, this is what they should include, here's the direction we provide to official plans, etc. So you could have this for all the different tools we use. I just wanted to realize we did a little bit of sort of workshopping for staff. We reviewed a whole bunch of other of these types of policy documents that are across the province, and just trying to look at what types of principles are included, and also look at some of the different legislation. And we identified some initial draft principles that we'd like to get some feedback from the public on, and they're up here on the screen. So recognize that healthy communities require a sustainable balance between environmental, social, economic priorities and interests. Some of this language also recognized from the strat plan as well, so there's some alignment with the language we've already used. Acknowledge that protecting natural systems over the long term is best achieved through science-based approach that manages human activities, natural resources across the watershed. Consider the impacts of climate change on people, property, and the environment. Avoid the potential for negative impacts to people, property, and environment by directing development and site operations away from natural features. Work with landowners, stakeholders, municipal and private partners to develop appropriate policies that meet the requirements of all relevant legislation. Continuously pursue practical approaches to the management of water and natural resources based on the application of sound science, creativity, and innovation. Learn from and inform watershed residents, member municipalities, partners, and clients of the value of watershed features and functions, and minimize the potential risk of harm to people and property resulting from flooding or stability. So, look, sorry about that, it's a long one, but the point of all that is that at any given point in our policy document, the policy, we want to be able to go back to this item to say that's why that policy is there. It's to deal with this core principle. So just a few highlights from some of the different sections. With respect to floodplains, it's generally in line with the current policy framework for floodplain planning in Ontario. It aligns generally with the PPS. There's some tweaks and changes to be made. There could be some further enhancements to the permitted uses to better explain, what types of uses might be permitted or could be permitted within the floodplain. With respect to valley lands, the valley lands policy is kind of monolithic. It doesn't actually, it speaks basically to the role and risk associated with valley lands from a slope stability or erosion perspective, but doesn't talk about the natural heritage function. So sometimes valley lands can have also that natural heritage function as well. The policy document needs to recognize that. And again, some flexibility for development and site elevation hazard uses could also be considered in this case. I think we have an opportunity to provide a good direction to local municipalities as well around planning for intensification around valley lands, which can be a little bit of a sticky subject matter and get into sort of conflicts between, say, growth plan objectives and provincial policy statement objectives and how it plays out. So providing some clarity there would be a good opportunity. With respect to groundwater and source water protection, it's a bit of a, there's a hole in the document and the content, but you have it elsewhere in other documents. So what I'm talking about is, for example, your Niagara source protection plan. The current policies don't talk anything about source protection. It's just we need to update it to reflect that there's a main document that deals with that and provide the appropriate cross-references. Great Lakes shorelines. The policy framework would benefit from a number of improvements and enhancements, some of them being providing direction on how to address changes to existing developments in our hazard area, which is the gap, maybe opportunities to encourage more natural forms of shoreline protection, sort of thing, and provide maybe some greater linkages to the watershed plans that have been approved or in place or being updated. With respect to wetlands, the wetland policy framework is solid and we have in the current policy document. It does reflect the provincial policy statement and a range of permissions associated with wetlands. One of the things more modest is just the language. Some of the definitions need to be updated and tweaked a little bit there. And again, some further guidance on passive recreational uses would be helpful to do. Again, the same could be said for natural heritage systems planning. A lot of definitions have changed honestly, and we need to update them. For example, the definition of natural heritage systems has changed, so we need to tighten that section up a little bit. A lot of the source tools that are used by biologists and staff to evaluate environmental features, that source document can change, so the references, those documents need to be updated. New EIS policies that are in place, we need to update that section. Hazardous sites, this is a term that refers to unstable soil, unstable ground. There's a very small section in the current document that speaks to this development and hazardous sites. And section generally does reflect the current provincial plan framework. One of the things that was noted in discussion with staff is that just not awareness of what other hazardous sites there may be in Niagara, other than those that we already have mapped along the site, which has some unstable bedrock and whatnot. But other than that, not really aware of what's in the process. There'd be opportunity for future study or something to look at that as well. For stormwater management, you have stormwater management guidelines. It's a standalone document. You need to incorporate cross-reference there and quite a bit of content that we could include in the documents so that people don't have to go to multiple different sources. The fish out of that section, small change. It's not a big deal, but that section doesn't need to be completely rewritten. The reason there is that it's no longer agreements in place with the DFO, and the rules have changed, and you just need to completely overhaul that section. So finally, climate change. So the current document is silent on climate change, so we do need to put that in the document. PPS directs planning authorities to plan for climate change and to have strategies in place. Province releases climate change action plan, and the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change is supposed to provide some direction. So there'll be an opportunity to really have that influence the policies in the document. One of the points that came up at our talk session is there's also an opportunity to highlight all the things you're already doing that will make the watershed more resilient in place, and that's around restoring natural features, improving water quality, managing floodplains and development and running floodplains, those sort of things. I hope I didn't go too quick or take too long. I was trying to get through the material and so you have a report in front of you. The next steps are we would like to release the discussion paper, get some robust commentary on it, and then start working on the draft of the policy document. And we're looking to go, we're doing web sort of based engagement on the discussion paper. We have a standalone website. Over 2,000 hits on the website since the project started, so we do have active users that we can communicate with it. And on a subject like this that is a little bit narrow because it is policy, and the watershed is so big, the web is a pretty useful tool for us to engage people. But we will be out in the fall to do more face-to-face engagement. So that concludes the presentation. I'll try to answer any questions.
Thank you, Patty. I do appreciate the presentation. This motion is to release this discussion paper. And your slideshow will be available on our website.
Yes,
absolutely. All right. Members, Doug and then Brian.
Mr. Chair, thanks, Patty, thank you for the presentation. Very clear, quick, and concise, as much as possible. You did say it's very heavy, and we agree that it is. One thing I just want to talk about is that you are right, and the last time that we did something like this was 2007, and since that time, many of the municipalities in Niagara and many of the municipalities across Ontario, their official plans have changed. West Lincoln has, I know many of my neighbors have too as well. One of the things that I want to talk about, and perhaps maybe it's in there, I'm trying to find it, and I know where bits and pieces where it could be, is that one of the hot topics that we have right now in the township of West Lincoln, and recently we just passed a bylaw, is on site alteration bylaw. Where would I find anything pertaining to site alteration bylaws that the NPCA will be implementing?
So that there is, in the current policy document, there's a small section on site alteration bylaw. I don't think we address that in any comprehensive way in this document.
I would suggest, Patty, that you do, and I would suggest that you look at all of the neighboring municipalities in Niagara, Haldeman, and Hamilton, since that's our watershed, to find out what we're doing in each one of those municipalities as it pertains to a site alteration bylaw.
We do that, absolutely.
Okay. Quite honestly, Mr. Chair, if I can just make a comment, we are very sick and tired of a lot of different bills coming from other neighboring municipalities to the north. I'm going to suggest perhaps maybe the Toronto area, and it's they're doing their best management that they can do, but it gets handed off to a third-party construction company, and all of a sudden one day we end up with 1,000 truckloads of dirt in our municipality. We don't want that anymore. And we want the administrative environment to be more involved in site alteration and fill coming into our municipalities. Now, the caveat to that, Mr. Chair, is that we do not want to infringe upon the rights of our agricultural people and our farmers. They have rights. They really do. And we respect that in West Lincoln, their rights, a farmer's right to fulfill on their land. So we've tried to, in our site alteration bylaw, find that happy medium, that balance, so that we protect ourselves, but also allow the farmers to do what they do best and be protectors of the land. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Patty, we have noted that in the minutes of the meeting, we can take note of that. And so it'll be something to be able to advise us on how you're addressing that. What you're asking for now is to release the current discussion paper, which may or may not have these particular items that we raised today in it. But you will be able to respond to it once it's released?
Yeah, and any matters that come up today that the board feels are missing in content, depending if there's a lot, we can certainly open it up and change it and release it in a week or two's time. Or if it's just a small thing, we'll do a short little addendum and we'll post that to our business site.
So your suggestion is that with maybe a week's delay, you might be able to incorporate some of the suggestions the board puts in today?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, well, we appreciate that, and I take some comfort in that. Okay, I have Brian and then Sam.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. During our strategic planning process, we formed 4 different groups, etc. The policy group had the largest task, but the objective was for board members as well as members of the public to clearly discern what is the mandate, what's the source of this policy, and secondly, is it firm or does it have some interpretability or flexibility, or is it locally derived, okay, and something that originates from this organization that the community name. I like many of the recommendations we have here. One is to include graphics, to include photographs, etc., to help with the readability of this. But it is a pretty gargantuan task, given the diversity of the topics. Can I recommend that you give consideration to using colored text to demonstrate? For example, it doesn't have to be this color. Red, if it is mandated by an organization that's external to us and is an absolute must-do. Orange or green or whatever, for something that is given to us as a broad mandate where we are the interpreters in terms of the flexibility in the questions. And then some last color that would be policies that originate with this body, are ordered by this body, and can be changed by this body without any recognition of provincial or federal bodies that are allowed. If that sort of color coding, whatever colors it happen to be, could be instituted, it would make it, my opinion, more readable for the people, particularly become at some point in time new members of this organization, but more importantly, more readable and understandable to members of the public. We keep saying, because over time historically, we've had more and more given to us, we've had more and more concern with people in the environment for protection, etc. Having means of clearly picking up what's mandated, what's interpretable, and what's totally flexible would be helpful.
Okay. So, like we frame that, there are a lot of different ways to deal with it, and some color-coded text could be one way. And I think what we'll do is take that suggestion, talk with staff, and sort of bounce around a couple of different ideas on how to do it. Traditionally, in other types of documents, use very precise words, which is only good for the interpreter and the individual reader at first glance. So I get your point that it is about kind of easily being able to see it without having to read for the word like encourage, which we all interpret to be, you don't have to do it, but we encourage you to do it. We'd like you to do it. So I usually use language precisely, but we can use graphics and formatting to augment that approach.
Okay, and secondly, there's considerable attempts currently to coordinate review to try and get commonality of language, rich policy statements, various kinds, etc. And hopefully we'll be current with that, because it should be basically, it's part of being percolated right now, but it should be coming to finalization sometime in the months ahead, that we incorporate this report.
So you, Mr. Chair, we to the extent possible, we're sort of aiming to end this, trying to get this done before the winter, or sort of ending the calendar year. If the province comes out with this new document within a reasonable timeline, and we can incorporate them with new definitions, that we should be able to do that. Otherwise,
Henry, Brian, Sandy?
Through you, Chair Patty, thank you for the presentation. I have some concerns, and I'll just use the example of hazardous sites, 3.8 hazardous sites. So under 3.8.3, three issues opportunity policy draft, it suggests that further analysis be conducted to determine whether any additional natural hazards are located in the NPCA jurisdiction. Now, I'm going to assume there's a cost to that, and that's borne by the NPCA.
Jan, go ahead, guys.
I mean, I'll ask a succession question, and hopefully we can kind of, give the answer to most of it. This to me seems like we are proposing another level or another layer of policy and bureaucracy development within our watershed, within the Niagara region. And that really scares me, because it's really open-ended.
yeah.
I'm going to assume if we dig down deep enough, we will find hazardous sites that weren't previously identified, therefore sterilizing those particulars. And I'm not saying identifying them as a bad thing, because obviously we don't want development on unstable areas. But I'm sure that's been going on for ages in Niagara. Is there a grandfather clause that goes with this one? Why are we expanding that particular policy? Are we expanding other policies under hazardous lands, under wetlands? I mean, this leads me to believe that now it's upon the NPCA to go explore further and look for other, obstacles.
Okay, so hopefully I'll lay this so this is the only one area, I think one of the only areas in the document where we said I think there's an information gap, something that was with the mapping, and we looked at it all the time. And from my understanding, discussion with staff, the term hazardous sites or mapping, and I really only include on that along the southern area. There could be other unstable soils and other locations. You know where they are. So we have a suggestion here with let's write a new policy, let's create a new layer. The suggestion here is at a later date, NPCA take us back, look at it, decide what do you think the appropriate investigation is, fact, talk to the NRF, decide what the appropriate, just identify a gap we best can figure out how best it suits you to close the policy document and create a new layer of the mapping and everything else to represent.
All right. Do other municipalities utilize hazardous site mapping? Do municipalities have an inventory of hazardous sites within their own individual municipalities?
If I may, in fact, I would submit it's the opposite way. We've been getting requests from the town of Lincoln actually asking us where are your maps on hazardous sites. And we don't have that. We find it, as Patty's indicated, a gap. And so we have the provincial mandate to identify them, but we don't have the accurate mapping to identify them. So municipalities are asking us to map it out, so when they're dealing with landowners, they can clearly show them.
And one more on top of that, are there particular thresholds? I mean, is there a standard or metrics that identify a hazardous site as a site that isn't? And
yeah, this is something, I'm not a geologist, so delving into a bit of a definition of an area that's a little bit unclear, but there is a geological definition of what it is.
and the province sets those thresholds?
They set the definition of the survey.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So members, are there any further questions for Patty? Yes, Steve. Thank you.
Just clarification. This document, you want to release to the public. Okay. And this document is going on the dedicated website. And our website?
Very interrelated.
Peter, can you help me out with the website?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah. As we would typically do, we'll go to the project website, or we'll also, it already exists, but we'll also include a link on our NPCA website directly to that.
Go to this. Okay. So now comes when I say the terminology flow. I pick up report 8116. And purpose says guidance document titled Policies, Procedures, and Guidelines for Administration of land use policies. So I'm looking at this document, it's telling me that we're going to have a development of policies, procedures, and guidelines for the NPCA. Is that an accurate description of this project?
Patty, would you clarify?
Or is it just policy?
That document you use references the current title of the document we have in place to use it.
Okay, this is the current, okay. So you're going to update it. Are you going to include the policies, the procedures, and the guidelines? Everything is being reviewed. Okay. So everything is being reviewed. I go to this document, and they both say document review, which is good. Document review, we're reviewing our procedures. I know at least one standing committee that is waiting for our policies on watershed. But you can't refuse. But then I turn to this thing, policy review, document review, and it's called living landscape. Is there a disconnect in terminology? Because this, I'm planting trees.
All right, Patty, would you?
So a really great question, a very good question. And so over the years, having done policy and review exercises for municipalities and health and conservation authorities, one of the biggest problems is the easier part is for me to sit at my desk with a bunch of documents, review it, and make recommendations. The hard part is to get people's interested in what I have to say, get their opinions, get their thoughts, and you can challenge, you can debate it, you can pull apart and make it a good policy. For any of you done an official plan project, sometimes the attendance at these things can be really low. Take the newspaper, official plan review, nobody's showing up.
Right.
So what we did, one of the first thing we did is just come up with a bit of a brand for this project. We might go up and say, we'd like to talk to you about policies, procedures, guidelines, administration, blah, blah, blah. Nobody's going to listen to lots of them. So we call it, the name of the project, we call it Living Landscape. It's easy to understand. And it's just sort of more brand to wrap it exactly to review it.
But if I were to use that as the advertising logo, people wouldn't know what the hell it is.
If they're interested in that, they may then ask questions.
Like if it's a discussion paper and underneath that discussion paper title, you were to put in policies, procedures, NPCA policies, procedures, and guidelines, then this document, okay, you get my drift, because if I were to pull up on the website Living Landscape, big deal. So you got to tell me what it's about. You got to give me the meat.
Member Lee, I think you make a good point about how this is transmitted to the public, communicated to the public. And I agree with you that the policy that seems to be getting, regulation seems to be getting the public attention. So, Pat, if we take that note under advisement and how we put this out to the public, I think Member Beatty's point is well taken. Maybe a little bit different approach than might have been a year ago. But there seems to be some focus on that policy, and that's what people are, I'm certainly getting the feedback that we need to look at how we do things, our policy, how we implement, and how we enforce, and all those kind of things. We'll get more attention than you might have thought a year ago. We came up with this Living Landscape branding.
Mr. Chairman, if I may continue, there's a whole group of people living along the Welland River who are now waiting for what is going to be the result of this. They're waiting. They want to see the policies And we have put off the drawing of the floodplain line until these policies are ready to be delivered to the public. So we have to go through this entire process before we can finish the floodplain mapping. And there's going to be a microscope on this stuff, and you set this up there. I want to make sure that people along the Long River know it's there.
Okay, fair point.
Yep.
Patty?
Not on all this council, but we did talk about the floodplain policy framework.
Yep.
Current policies we have
Yep.
in place. So
I understand it's all there, it's all coming, I don't have a problem with that. The problem I have is with
the brand.
the branding of the living landscape, which is the discussion paper for our policies, procedures, and I want that clarified.
Okay, will do. All right, members, are there any further questions? I would ask then that we modify the recommendation, or at least we take direction, and that is to confirm that the suggestions, that one in particular, and a couple of others that have been made by the board, will be incorporated in this discussion paper for public consumption before you release it. So then, in fact, in 2 weeks, you'll be able to release it with the incorporation. And I'd ask board members to trust Peter and Patty to work together to incorporate our concerns, so we don't have to have another meeting to approve another release. So I ask members then for a mover and a seconder of the recommendations with the addition of to include board suggestions presented at this meeting.
So moved.
Stewart, seconded by Mayor Joyner. Any further questions?
I just have a little question for you.
Okay.
When we go to the public, we've done, I think, a fairly good job with the Welland watershed floodplain thing and communicating with the public. If anything, we've gone way beyond, but I think we're getting a good feel for what is out there. Are we going to use a similar model, like 6 meetings, 8 meetings, and communicate this? Because this has to be communicated across the entire watershed. Have we got plans for, surely it's not going to be 1 week.
Okay, fair enough. I think we can respond to that.
Have we got some idea where we're going?
If I may, through the chair, to Member Deedy, directed to item 4. That is our plan for
2
citizen
open house
meeting,
events.
2 open house events, roadshow events being planned, and our web-based engagement.
I think I'm cut. 2 is not going to cut it for this size of the project. 2, I think we're up to lunch.
All right. Well, the recommendations at this
I mean,
point.
we've had, what, 12
Yeah.
for the flood. Now you're going to do 2 for your policies, procedures, and
If I may, that was contained within the RFP document.
Yeah, I know.
We approved. And if it's a direction of the board to include additional open houses,
Well, you know your community better than I do, but based on my experience with the floodplain, I think you're going to need more than 2.
All right, so we can take a direction from the board, if the rest of the board agrees, that Peter come back to us with a recommendation for the next board meeting for further consultation and expansion of the phase 3 engagement. That would include a bit of a budget consideration beyond the original scope, and what recommendations would be reasonable. I'm not sure about 8.
I don't think 2 is enough, maybe 8's too much, John.
Okay, Brian?
I would recommend, if it's not already planned, very focused stakeholder consultation. Get the development community, get the environmental advocates, get the people who are going to be directly affected most directly, get the agricultural community. Okay, a focus group from there. We have vested interest in how the policy is unfolding. It becomes more accessible to them and more understandable to them.
Okay, that's a good idea. I think Lisa has taken note of those suggestions, and we have confirmation from Peter and Patty, that this document will be modified before release, and that we will be releasing it within the month. Is that fair? All right, members, are you ready for the question? I'll call for the, I need to do room secretary. Sorry, you did have that? Stewart and Mayor Brown. Okay. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you, Patty. Well presented. I think the process will be very helpful, and I've become very familiar with the public perception and conception of what we should be doing, what we shouldn't be doing, and the how we enforce. So this process will hopefully bring the public up to speed on what we can and can't do, and then the board will be able to address those questions. I think as we heard a couple of times in Niagara Falls the last couple of weeks ago, that there are some public misconceptions of what we can, should, must, may do as an authority. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you, members. Now we move on to the next item of business is the Conservation Authorities Act review. Carmen has a fairly brief presentation, but as we noted earlier, our final recommendations have to be into the province by September 9th. So this is probably our last opportunity to really hear on this subject. Carmen, please.
Okay, so thank you, Chair. Board members, I'm talking about this document that you got separately. It's bound that you received today. So why did you get it today, hard copy, and why didn't it come in your formal agenda packages? I was still reviewing Conservation Ontario's comments that the board chair is actually going to vote on tomorrow electronically for an electronic vote. So I had to incorporate those comments, review them to see if it aligns with ours. And thus it has to come to you now to get your approval for submission, because they're due September 9th. We don't meet as a board until after September 9th, and we don't meet in August. So this is the only opportunity I have before you. So, Conservation Authorities Act review, real quickly, there's 3 stages. You'll still have additional time to comment. Stage 1, we initially responded to. Stage 2 is what we're talking about today, and then when there's proposed changes posted on the EPR, there'll be a third opportunity to provide input. Stage 1 findings. So, in summary, the province says that the watershed, how we're organized, the 36 conservation authorities by watershed, that's the feedback they got is that's an appropriate benefit. The public benefits from education and those parameters. They say right in their document there's no need to do wholesale changes. So the province got feedback that conservation authorities are operating as they were intended to, and that, however, there was a strong desire to update the legislation for policy work to match modern expectations for clarity, transparency, and accountability. So, these are the stage 2 priorities that the province have identified. It's in your document. But here's what I want to reference. That the province says that conservation authorities have already taken steps to help meet these expectations by involuntarily incorporating best management practices into their operations. So in your package, you'll see our strategic plan. And right before that strategic plan, I referred to you, we actually wanted to submit to the province all our best practices, because we actually do this. We're ahead of the curve. And we just, I polled our extended management team at a meeting, and these are the 27 best management practices that we've implemented in the past 2 years to meet this goal of greater clarity, consistency, and transparency. So, I'm going to go over the 18 recommendations that I summarized looking for your approval. I'll go, Mr. Chair, I'll go one by one. If you want to stop me at any recommendation, please do so. So what we're asking is that you're going to support these recommendations that we submit to the province. So recommendation number 1 is that the province provide us with greater financial support in order to implement best management practices because we have our current mandate programming. If there's a requirement for us to do more, we need some additional provincial funding to implement best management practices. There is a cost to put together strategic plans, annual reports, quarterly communications reports, reach out to and community and citizen engagement. All those best management practices that we do, there comes a cost, and we don't want to take that cost away from existing programming. So if there's a requirement for these best management practices or any new ones, that there's greater financial support. That's recommendation number 1. Recommendation number 2. This comes from the Drummond report and actually came from municipal planners amongst 12 local municipalities and at the region. There is something called jurisdictional crowding. If you're a landowner, you got to get permits from a lot of different agencies. And they say that that permit is crowded and that there should be some rationalization and consolidation of entities and agencies involved in land use planning, so that if you're a landowner, you're going to one stop or one consolidated stop to get all your land use and all your planning needs. That's a recommendation from the Drummond report. We ask that you support it. Recommendation number 3, that if the province gives out delegates any additional provincial program, mandated programs, it's followed through with funding for those programs. Recommendation number 4, that currently it is the 3 funding municipalities that appoint board members, and that you're supporting that methodology of appointing board members to conservation authority boards. 5, that we recommend, currently legislation says board members are appointed for 3-year terms, just a little administrative change, make it to the 4 years to align with municipal elections. 6, that the levy should be clearly identified on the municipal tax bill. This is a best management practice in the city of Ottawa. In fact, if you look at the city of St. Catharines information that they give out to their residents, the Conservation Authority levy is clearly identified. And we would suggest that that's the best management practices that municipalities should do.
Carmen, just on that point, what St. Catharines does is provide sort of an information sheet. They are not ready to put it on the tax bill as a line item, but they do put it in the sheet that attached to the bill that lays out the conservation authority and so other things in detail.
For example,
there still seems to be some kind of administrative concern among city treasurers or clerks about that separate line. So that's how St. Catharines is dealt with.
correct. So if you're a resident and you have the average household that pays $3,200 in municipal taxes, at $27 of that $3,200 goes towards the Conservation Authority levy. And that's what we would like clearly identify.
Thank you.
Okay? 7, we did this in 2015. We restructured the whole Conservation Authority budget here. And we aligned it to make it reporting and readable similar to municipal budgets, where you have an operating budget and a capital budget and no blending in between. We've separated that as municipalities do with the addition of a reserve. We think that that should be a best management practice. 8, this is with the our levy issue with the City of Hamilton, where we support Conservation Ontario's recommendation that sections 27 and sections 26 of the Act be repealed because they're in direct conflict with Ontario Regulation 670, which we apply our calculations. 9, on the section 28 that Patty made reference to, that we have the ability to issue stop work orders, orders to comply, and increasing the penalties for those who are in violation of our regulations. And the discussion is relevant because we talked about shorelines. We actually add shorelines into the Act so it matches our regulations. Because right now, we have a regulation that talks about shoreline protection, but it's not really within the Act. And so the recommendation of Conservation Ontario is put shorelines directly into the Act. 10, We support Conservation Ontario's recommendation of Section 37. Your per diems and salary expenses must be approved by the OMB. And we think that's bureaucratic administration to allow per diems set by the boards similar to municipalities using what you've already recommended but hasn't yet been approved, some type of cost of living or consumer price index formula. We also recommend definitions, conservation of land, and interference in any way. Member Beatty talked about similar language in the consolidated review. We don't have this language, but we actually do this. So we want to see similar language incorporated in the Conservation Act. 12, we recommend, as the NPCA, the establishment of a multi-ministry and multi-stakeholder body. The province actually had one in play. It got disbanded to talk about provincial issues when it comes to conservation authorities, that a provincial body made up of different ministries and different stakeholders would help in providing ongoing dialogue. 11, that the province recommend key performance measures that we are actually implementing. And if there's ones they want to identify, like every conservation authority should have a strategic plan, is not all due, then we think that's good to put in as guidelines. 14, again, strategic plans, annual reports, financial statements, we already do. Some don't do this as conservation authorities. So, and a report back program of when we receive funds, whether from the municipality or the province, we report back and we say what we did with your funds. 15, that if you establish a relationship with Conservation Ontario, that decisions or the governance model of Conservation Ontario is actually decided by Conservation Authority chairs and not staff. Right now, if there's a vote at Conservation Ontario, it's a mixture of staff and chairs who actually vote on policy. The chair has been very vocal at Conservation Ontario on behalf of the NPCA saying that's not the right model. Only Conservation Authority chairs should be responding on policy matters and decisions at the provincial level, and staff should just be there as support and guidance. Similar to municipal models, where the mayor is out at provincial committees, being part of it, not the CAO. And so that's a model we're asking for your support. That we publicly publish monthly and quarterly financial summary reports in your board package. We already do this best management practice. When we did the workshop sessions in the province, some don't do this, and we think it's a best management practice and the province should recommend. 17, the document says you should streamline your permit process. We've actually already did it with our strategic plan, and we asked the province to recognize that. 18, we support the recommendation that there be a memorandum of understanding for dialogue communication protocols with First Nations. And then finally, and this is key to your discussion, there's no real guidelines when you do a project, whether it's a policy review, whether it's floodplain, or you're doing a master plan. How many open houses should you do? How many should you do surveys? It's very inconsistent. I tell you, some of our colleagues come to Peter and I saying, we can't believe you did 12 community open housing meetings, right? Because they do one. And we're saying to the province, you gotta provide some guidelines. And you mandated us to do some of these projects. We are doing it, but there's inconsistency from what we do with our neighbor. Now, sometimes it's good to have that flexibility, but sometimes people question saying 12 is too many, 1 is not enough. And we would like to see the province recommend some balance and guidelines when it comes to the type of community consultations that they believe is required as we implement their programs. So, board members, those are the 19 recommendations we're asking you to adopt in order for us to submit to the province.
Thank you, Carmen. Members, I think that most of those reflect a number of discussions we've had in the past. So I'd ask you for any questions, and I need a mover and seconder.
First of all, the document that you gave us only has 16. 17, 18, and 19 are not in the document. I'll just point that out.
Okay.
It's just a numbering issue. It's not a,
Well, there's 16 here.
in the red.
There's 16, no, the 17, 18, 19 are not on this document,
Oh, on the summary.
right?
I missed them.
They're not on the summary.
Okay.
And the electronic one you sent, they're not on that summary.
All right. So
That's the
that
first
would be modified for publication.
That's the first item. The second item is I support this document except for number 8.
Okay.
Number 8 is the essence of what the levy dispute is all about.
Okay.
And I would ask that it be removed until that levy dispute is resolved. Because the Act says this, the regulation does this. Hopefully, the result will be that it will be based on the assessment within the watershed for that municipality, and not the way it is now. Hopefully, that will be resolved. But I can't support number 8. Because that is what is before the hearing right now, and we're asking for it to be removed. I would ask that number 8 to be removed until such a time that we proceed with the due process as we have now, sort of interfering with the due process by putting number 8 in.
So your concern is the number 8 recommendation would interfere with the current process. And Carmen,
I think you just skirted that.
all right, as a member of Hamilton, I respect your concern on that. And ask Carmen to respond.
The recommendation is that we support Conservation Ontario's position on the matter. Because I understand the point respectively, but this is in the Conservation Ontario document. This issue on the levy is not unique to Niagara. Many are looking at how to resolve it. And Conservation Ontario, the 36 of them, said one way to resolve it is to repeal these sections, and we're asking that you support Conservation Ontario's position on it.
Well, I think they're wrong,
All right.
and I think we're wrong to put it in. So.
Okay, members, so we'll note that as we go through those, and I need a motion in any case. We'll ask Vicki.
And this is all fine, you know, on paper. But we have the power, conservation authorities have the power, you know, to change things. If you truly stick and abide by your mandate, then we're not doing that.
Thank you, Mickey, for that comment. We are, this is a response to the provincial's legislation. And you're speaking more to our policy and our own policy and implementation. So for the moment, we keep the discussion to our recommendations to the province on the Conservation Act and review. Brian? So I'm a mover, and the seconder is the daddy to the recommendations. And perhaps to deal with Stuart's concern, we can vote on item 8 separately, please. Okay? Members, then to the motion with the exception of number 8. I'll call the question. All those in favor? That carries. And then to the motion of deferring or excluding item 8 from the recommendation.
Removal.
So member B
I will move it.
has moved that that item be removed. I need a seconder. The other member from Hamilton, Mr. Kaspersek. All in favor of that recommendation? I see 3. All those opposed? So the motion with regard to Mr. Member Beatty and Kaspersek is defeated for the moment. And so we also will bear that in mind when I vote on the Conservation Ontario resolution tomorrow.
Mr. Chairman, I would ask my negative vote to be recorded.
All right? We'll take the record. Well, we'll do recorded that the 3 members opposing will be noted in the minutes. Okay? Thank you, members. So I'm pleased to say that we have been vote on 8. We did vote on number 8. Those in favor of excluding number 8, and there was 3 in favor.
Does that mean it's included? It's a negative motion. I don't know how is that.
Yeah, so it has not been withdrawn from the original.
Oh, I thought it was separated, voted separate, but it wasn't.
The motion was to, yeah, okay, fair enough. So then we'll do a vote then again to include item 8 in our recommendation, just to be clear on our motion. So I'll call those. All those in favor? And those opposed? So those, again, will be recorded as opposed, including Mickey. All right, now I think we've sufficiently dealt with that matter. Mr. Beatty.
Just a comment. It's shown in the attachment was the best management. Taking a lot of criticism, unjustly, in recent months in terms of our operation. Maintaining the way we said it. To see somewhere earlier in the report that there's going to be an updating of where we are planning to work with and what the progress is. I would recommend this be included for a communication piece at that point in time when we're formulating and hearing this specific changes that happen. It isn't spelled out here as I can see in this kind of list. One of the most notably is that thanks to this technological skill, extremely enhanced reporting through the process and use of technology in our meeting. And in particular, the fact that we've now gone to the management style that provides us options, not a singular conclusion to a report, but gives an opportunity to see the staff preferences that we've had as a best management practice.
Okay, well, I appreciate that note, and we'll have that noted in the minutes. So members, before we lose quorum, I know we're getting late. I'd like to move into item 15. That's a resolution, that report number 8316, regarding the memorandum of understanding with Alderman County, Long Point Region Conservation Authority, and the Grand River Conservation Authority received, and the CAO Treasurer of the NPCA directed to formally enter into this memorandum of understanding, and immediately follow the approval of this report. And once access to the municipal assessment data is provided to the NPCA by Alderman County. Member Shurton is unable to be here today, but I look for a mover and seconder. Hopefully we don't need any further discussion on that. Member Kasper, and seconded by Member Niagara. Ready for the question? All those in favor? That carries. Thank you, members. Next item is the Canada 150 grant final contribution agreement with Delegates. That the board approve entering into the contribution agreement for funding under the Canada 150 Community Infrastructure Program in the amount of $245,000 for the expansion of the Midbrook Conservation Area of recreational assets. Moved by Member Beatty and seconded by Member Kaspersek. Sorry about that. I thought it was appropriate.
Absolutely.
Call the question then. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. just one short item. I have taken the opportunity, as I had said at Regional Council, to take a look at some of the Niagara region's properties that are up for disposal, as mainly as a result of the Niagara Regional Police Headquarters. So I have gone with staff and had a look at a couple of those properties. And my suggestion is that we have staff come back and revisit before the September board meeting. A revisit of our accommodations review. It's a report we had almost a year and a half ago and put it on the back burner. So that the board take another look at it, revisit that whole accommodation issue. My review of the properties the region is offering at this point is that they're not really appropriate for the board, and we're not ready, I think, to make any decisions on those. So the opportunity to take advantage of any of these properties is probably going to be missed. But I suggest to the board that we have a revisit that whole accommodations question. There's nice properties in Hamilton. Okay. So I'll take member Beatty and then member Fuchsia. Brian first.
Recommended we send a discussion of social services part. Because while we may not see appropriateness in our moving to surplus facilities, the social services department may in fact have an interest in one space being provided. And that would free up space for us and our scope of the building currently.
Okay, so discussion of social services regarding the current building that we operate. All right, staff will take that and
You
get
have to
their
read what service standard?
Yeah, it's a federal department.
No, that is, there's about 5 minutes, it's pretty much, and then we install some of our quarters to do it.
So it opened up some of the space in that building we currently occupy. Okay, last other business, Mickey?
Yeah, you were saying about selling property, property up for sale?
Niagara region
Yeah.
has properties up for sale.
What kind of property?
There's a detachment, Niagara Falls detachment, there's 110 James Street, and the property of the current 38 church or something. Police headquarters.
You weren't talking about, like the conservation area?
No, this would be for
For conservation, administration building.
officers, yeah. Okay.
There's a lot of schools going out for sale.
Yes, I know. School board property maybe worth your property as well. Other business, Sandy?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to bring it to the board's attention, the good news that the foundation received with respect to Department of Fisheries and Oceans. To approve the funding application on behalf of the foundation for St. John's Pond Fish Habitat improvements. So it's a good news story for the foundation. The amount is $32,000 this year, $50,000 next year. Special thanks to our staff team for helping us technical aspects of putting that application together, and Kevin Valley and the foundation.
Thank you, Andy. And that'll be noted in the minutes. Foundation is picking up some steam after a little bit of 2 years of being a little bit quiet. So, thank you, Sandy.
And one other thing, I know we do have a delegation, and unfortunately, before we move forward, I think that would be fair to
She's still,
once we
the presentation's outside, so we can accommodate them. All right.
Okay, we'll get a minute. So we want to deal with that before we go on camera.
The plan, Mr. Chair, the plan is that we finish our business, and then we go out and we have a company that wants to show us the services they provide for this purpose.
All right, then. Well, let's continue then and get rid of deal with
What's the forum tomorrow, Mr. Chair?
Quorum is 8. So we're very close.
Yeah. I gotta get you over to the zip line. I leave in a few minutes.
All right, so I have a mover and seconder that the meeting now moves to closed Edie. All those in favor? Members of the camera? And how's our live streaming doing?
Want me to shut it down?
Yes, sir.